Welcome to the International Code Council Region 1 and Region 1 Radio Show. My name is Tim Spears. I'm the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014 and we're made up of 3 states, California, Nevada, and Hawaii. That also includes many ICC chapters. We are dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing individuals together. This podcast series was designed to highlight code officials and code professionals and share their stories with you, along with the many members of our chapters. If you enjoy our show, make sure to please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe to our YouTube channel. In this episode, I spoke with Chris Olvera, Supervisor of the Outreach and Education Unit in the Building Standards Office of the California Energy Commission. In this episode, we discussed his background, educational opportunities and resources the California Energy Commission provides to code officials, emergency preparedness relating to energy disruptions, energy sustainability, and increasing resiliency of the built environment, along with many more topics. Links to the items that we discussed can be found in our show notes. Chris, welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a good conversation. We're just actually going through, or we just recently went through the code updates here, the triannual code update cycle or triannual cycle here in California. And so I think it's always good to, we talk about building and fire, but you happen to be on the energy side of things. And so I think that as we talk about energy here in California, that's probably a very big topic that I'm sure many of us are going to be interested to hear about the different things that you're doing in your area and how, kind of helps code professionals throughout the state. So, so we're excited to have you on. I think that this will be a good opportunity. Not only are we in just recently passed the triannual code adoption cycle, but as I talked to my state fire marshal friends, they're already in the intervening code cycle and already starting work there. So work never ends, right?
Yes, it's a revolving door for building code overall. Yeah.
Yes. Well, hey, if we could start first with your background, if you could share with us your background and tell us a little bit about your role as the supervisor of the Outreach and Education Unit in the Building Standards Office of the California Energy Commission.
Yeah. So, hello. Yeah, my name is Christopher Olvera, and my background, it may seem a little awkward, but I think it ties in. I'm actually a criminal justice major with a minor in psychology. I graduated from Sac State, go Stingers. And so, I actually worked on the Energy Standards Hotline during my college, tenure career there, I should say. I guess I picked up a knack for building code. It's not penal code or, criminal code like I studied in college, but it still is code, it's law. And so, I guess I picked up a knack for it, and I've been here ever since. I actually did pursue a career in criminal justice for a while. It was an actual correctional facility, a juvenile facility there off of Bradshaw in Sacramento for a while, but came back, and I've been here ever since. I'm very fortunate. Started as an energy analyst and worked my way up to where I am now, which is, currently I'm the supervisor of the Outreach and Education Unit, the O&E unit, in the Building Standards Office in the Efficiency Division, and I currently oversee 5 permanent staff. We have a mix of scientists and engineers. I also oversee 5 college students who work on our Energy Standards Hotline, and our role is to provide outreach education to stakeholders on California Energy Code, Title 24 Part 6 requirements to stakeholders statewide, Californians, and also even outside the state. We have people contacting us.
So when you say provide education or insight and help to stakeholders, does that also mean code professionals? Let's say, a building code professional or a building inspector or a fire code professional that may have questions on the energy code?
Absolutely. I would probably say that they, without a doubt, I've been doing this for close as both when I started as a student and permanent now. For almost 2 decades now. I have the gray hairs. If you're listening in, you just believe me. You can't see it, but you can. They're there. So you're doing this almost 2 decades, and I would say that without a doubt, enforcement agencies are our number one customers. We're constantly working with CABO, ICC chapters, code officials statewide, And I think that not only is it because they care about their jobs and what they do, but I think also a big incentive is our motivation is their ICC certs and continuing education units. So we're constantly involved with them in that capacity. So absolutely, yeah, code enforcement and enforcement agencies, AHJs, are number one customers, I would argue, yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. And you mentioned Calbo, and we just talked to Matt Wheeler not that long ago, actually a couple episodes ago. He was on our podcast and sharing a little bit of insight there. So now I would imagine as part of the outreach and education unit, you work to educate code professionals, right? You host classes or maybe work with other stakeholders or other organizations. But what type of work do you do to educate building and fire code professionals and stakeholders across the state, right? The state of California is a big state. You mentioned you have a multitude of others that are within your kind of shop area, but what's or some of the programs that you offer code professionals through public education or educating, like maybe private organizations like Calbo or those sorts of things?
Yeah, no. So our unit outreaches and educates code officials in a variety of ways. We develop fact sheets and guides and other educational materials that we publish on our online resource center.
Okay.
We also develop and provide trainings at O&E events like CABO, the ICC chapters, organizations like AIA, etc. We also exhibit at O&E events and distribute educational materials there, interact in person and respond to technical inquiries. We also regularly attend the ICC chapter meetings and provide agency updates there. We are also publishing our Blueprint newsletter quarterly, which contains articles and frequently asked questions that we receive on our hotline, or when we're in person or providing these trainings at the events, we incorporate those into the Blueprint. We also have our hotline, the college students that function Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. Anyone who has questions, and in particular code officials, they can reach out to them and they can assist them with their technical inquiries. And then also we coordinate and work with the utilities and also the regional energy networks, the RENs, and provide technical assistance for them for their O&E efforts as well as they provide trainings and materials for code officials statewide.
Now, one of the things I do want to kind of highlight is you mentioned college students, having college students, and you were one of those college students that participated in the hotline. And one of the areas that I would say we're an aging profession. You mentioned having gray hair. I have no hair, so if you're listening and not watching, most of my hair is gone. Now, part of it's by choice, and part of it's just genetics. But we talk about trying to get the next generation involved and trying to recruit new members into our field. And you mentioned you kind of took a non-traditional path. I took a non-traditional path. I actually began in healthcare and then kind of worked my way through things. And here I am today. I don't know how I got here, almost 20 years ago or 25 years ago, but you kind of do over time make that progression. So how can college students get involved and really work on that hotline that you're mentioning? What does it take? What additional education do they need to be members of that hotline?
Yeah, so we actually just hired 3 new students, and it's through UEI, the University Enterprises with Sac State, and so the requirements are is if you're going to college, you have taken so many semester or quarter units, and you maintain a certain GPA. In essence, you qualify. It's ideal to have engineers, but it's not necessary. Like for me, example, I was an engineer. I was a criminal justice major, minored in psychology, and here I am. So it's I would argue overall, like you said, Tim, that traditional to have an engineer probably step into this role, but it's not necessary. There's many people in this field who I work with who are music majors when they started out. So it's it takes all kinds, quote unquote.
Yeah. Now, music majors. So, are you trying to recruit them maybe into this profession? I'm sure that would be a kind of a transition they may not necessarily be thinking of, but maybe hopefully they could. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's in essence, anyone is welcome. What we usually look for when we're hiring hotline students is someone that can make a commitment. Like maybe they're
Mm,
early on in their college career, they're a freshman, sophomore. They still have a year or two to go, so that we can have. Because as you know, Tim, it takes time to educate
yeah.
an individual on the codes, and we're just focused on the energy code. So to help train them, get them, prepare them to respond to technical inquiries via the phone or
Hmm.
email. It takes time, so we have an investment, so we like to get a return. So yeah, any major. Again, it is good to have those majors to where long term when they do graduate, are they a major that may qualify, to come on with the state permanent or somewhere else as an energy analyst or a mechanical or an electrical or civil engineer. So again, yeah, having those bridges and those pathways are ideal, but they're traditional, but they're not always necessary.
Okay. So you do try to find that bridge, right? Once you're on the hotline, maybe we can then help move them to maybe that next step or that next phase in their career. And I would say that, obviously selfishly, if we could get them to maybe consider maybe a fire inspector or a building inspector or a building official. I mean, we're definitely struggling for new people to come into our ranks, and so I think that's always a good thing. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know this is definitely, I mean, this isn't a new issue, right? This has been
Mm-mm.
ongoing. I know when the recession hit in '07, '08, that was a big concern, in particular where you have a lot of experienced individuals end up retiring because they would make
Yeah.
more money that way, and then finding the new blood, quote unquote. So I've worked with many individuals and code officials who have taught at the universities and the community colleges to try to increase awareness and the need for this. We need educated code officials, and even also many of the builders working at the high school level as well. We've given a couple of presentations. I think was it Valera? I can't remember the name, but they were working with the high schoolers, and they were allowing
Okay.
them during the summertime session to go out there, put up drywall, work in the attic, and deal with some duct work. And so we were educating them on the energy code requirements. So yeah,
Oh,
no, I hear you loud and clear. There's definitely a
yeah.
need for code officials, and so yeah, the earlier we can start, the better. My
Yeah.
nephews are totally into Minecraft and building stuff, so I don't know if he's going to become an architect and maybe do some field inspections in the future, but he definitely has that mindset, and so yeah, nurturing
Yeah.
them from early on.
Well, I keep trying to recruit my son, and he's 19, and he has absolutely no desire. But who knows? Maybe in the future. Now, you mentioned starting in criminal justice, having a criminal justice degree. So, what drew you to maybe? I mean, it is kind of a regulatory field, right? Understanding regulation and that sort of stuff. But what drew you to more or less of the like you mentioned, the penal code and the law enforcement side of things, and more into regulation and the energy code?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. So how I got to the hotline was actually I was at a temp agency, and my mom had actually. It's funny because it's almost like this is my destiny. My mom was actually working at the Energy Commission when she was pregnant with me, and so
Oh,
I was literally there from day one. And then I was at a temp agency. I needed to get a new job, and my mom was working for the state. Said, "Hey, there's these opportunities. You should apply." So I did. I came on, and as I worked on the hotline, and then you got on full time. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I love working for this agency. I love dealing with the energy code and the building code, and definitely with code officials. For me, it's constantly evolving. I'm a nerd. I like to learn new things, and I'm constantly being pushed to evolve and to learn new technologies, learn new processes, and also and learn new people and how to communicate with them in various occupations and positions. And so that's what really drew me to the energy code and just building code in general, is that it's constantly evolving. It's requiring me to constantly learn new things and evolve, how I think and how I interact with individuals of different backgrounds and occupations. So that's what really drew me to it. It's constantly requiring me to be a better me and a better person and learn new things. And so that's what I like the most about it. I always tell people when they started, like, it's never the same thing every day. You could ask
yeah.
the same question, but it could be just a little different. So it's not exactly the same. it's not monotonous. You're always having to learn something new, and I really enjoy and appreciate that part of the job.
Well, yeah, I think you highlight, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand is no 2 days are the same. And the more that we're around people, because I actually, that's this type of stuff that, in talking with you and talking with others as part of this podcast, actually, these are the highlights for me, because I learned so much new stuff. And that's actually how this podcast started, was I get to talk to unique people that are, good people in the profession, doing good things, and being able to share their stories. And this is why we do what we do. And I think that, being able to highlight, the important work that you do, along with others, is always a good thing to be able to share with folks. So, but like I said, it was kind of selfish on my part. That's why I started it, because I wanted to start talking to more people and learning more things. So,
yeah, it's a great way not only to meet new people, but learn new things and help us educate each other. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Educating. And that's, I think all of us, right? That's, we really try to strive and focus on the education piece. And I think that we really work hard for that. So, speaking of education, one of the things here, that we experience a lot of not man-made disasters. I was going to say natural disasters. I mean, you've got your, fires, being in California, we have a lot of wildland fires. We have earthquakes, and that also, we'll maybe take or look at some supply or energy, issues, right? And maybe some disruptions. How does the Energy Commission help code professionals in the response to some of those natural disasters as we encounter them throughout the state?
Yeah, specifically for the division I'm in, the way I like to look at it is that we're very proactive, right? With building energy efficiency. We're reducing the demand on the grid so that, the supply can be met, right? So just be proactive from that perspective. But one example that does come to mind for the agency as a whole is, in regards specifically for supply issues, was last summer. This year we're having very cold weather, and, so far, beginning of the year, and then last year it was very warm. And I think we broke the record, at least here in Sacramento, where we're located, for, days over 100 degrees. I want to say, was it like 42? I can't remember. But I believe we broke a record. Yeah, there was the real potential for rolling blackouts, in particular as the demand for air conditioning increased. So our agency was in communication and coordinated with CalISO, the independent system operator. And, we assisted with communications and messaging to the public about supply, probably not going to be able to meet the demand and the need for homeowners and building owners, et cetera, to reduce their electrical usage, in particular during peak hours. And I don't know if you remember, Tim, at first it was like, okay, the 5 to 8, and then, okay, from 4, okay, now to 9, and then even 10 o'clock, it kept expanding. Yeah. And so we were involved with those efforts. There was articles, it was in the news, there was commercials, and I remember even one day there was text messages. And, kudos to all Californians because they were responsive. The messaging went out. They said, hey, if you guys can help out, we need your help. You need to reduce your electrical usage and appliance usage during these hours. And they were responsive, and we avoided major blackouts and kept the lights on, so to speak. So that's one example that stands out to me. But with that said, I want to give a shout out to all of the emergency staff and agencies, including OES, fire, enforcement agencies, and the volunteers who respond without hesitation to assist those in need during the recent floods, the fires we've had in California, the earthquakes, etc. We thank you and we appreciate you folks.
Yeah, California is a very diverse and dynamic state as we talk about weather, right? You mentioned having all the hot weather that we did over the summer, and then this winter it's actually been fairly cold. We've had a lot of moisture. Actually, I want to say that we might even set a record for the most snow that we've gotten ever, right? The snowpack right now is significant. If you haven't seen the pictures of Tahoe and the Sierra Nevadas, highly recommend that you check those out because we've gotten so much snow. It is definitely, since I've lived in California, that's the most snow I've seen here. So definitely cut into my hiking, but I'll take it. I'll take the snow. I like the wet weather, because we definitely need it. But I do remember that messaging over the summer, and I do remember hearing it. And so I know a lot of us did, and, tried to make sure that we had a significant power source. So that way we could avoid the rolling blackouts and any supply chain or supply issues as we move forward. So you mentioned reducing demand, and I know that the Energy Code does help with that, right? We talk about some of the different initiatives, but what are some of those initiatives to help reduce demand that the Energy Commission works on, with citizens and really people across the state?
Yeah, so in regards to that, I mean, there's several outreach programs, and our media, I would argue, is more involved with that.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's, flex your power, flip the switch, things of that nature, and then also coordinating with the utilities as well, both IOUs and POUs. So yeah, I would say that at least from the efficiency division perspective, we're more focused on, with the buildings, and so yeah, I would argue that outreaching to homeowners is a little more difficult because what is the incentive for them, right? And so definitely it's been more difficult to reach out to them, but definitely in the capacity that I'm in and moving forward, I want to find ways that we can communicate with them more. To educate them that, yes, building energy efficiency is important. When you're leaving those lights on, running appliances during peak demand, during times where, the supply may not be able to satisfy it, that's a real issue, right? And then also just in regards to building energy efficiency, and sustainability, many aren't aware of, with the older incandescent lights versus the LED lights and how more energy efficient they are, and they're supposed to last longer. In building energy efficiency is really hard just in general, not just for homeowners. What's the risk, right? And so, I mean, it's very real when it comes to fire and health and safety and structure, et cetera. That's very real, and people can see it, but a lot don't see also when it comes to this building energy efficiency and demand, where unfortunately during, when it is warm, people, unfortunately, especially elderly people, have passed away because they don't have the building energy efficiency and the cooling that, for the comfort, et cetera. People unfortunately die as a result. Also, when people don't have the heating during the cooling periods and they're burning candles, and the candles fall and start a fire, and unfortunately there's been families that have perished, including children, which is very sad. Or when you have you lose the power and the heat, and you run a generator and you're running it inside the home, exhausting it, and people pass and perish because of carbon monoxide poisoning. So that's what it's not directly but indirectly related to us, and definitely the utilities have done their outreach, and I don't know what our role could or should be in that, but I would definitely like to see it increase, and in particular during those times, how to outreach to homeowners to educate them about these issues, because I think people don't see the direct health and safety issue as it relates to energy efficiency. But I think with the example that I just provided, it may not be direct, but there is an indirect relationship, and unfortunately it is a health and safety issue, and people have passed away as a result of it.
Well, and I think that you hit on, and I think even myself included, we miss maybe some of that crossover and connection with the Energy Code, and how important the Energy Code is to what we do. Like you just said, making sure that we have sustainable energy to be able to provide that climate control for all of us in our built environment. And I think that some of us, forget about that. Like you mentioned, having auxiliary heating sources, space heaters. I've ran on fires with space heaters, candles. I've ran on fires with candles, and those types of things. And you hit on the carbon monoxide poisoning with use of emergency generators, and being able to help with that messaging. And I really think it's a shared messaging. I think that we work together, and I think some of us forget about that crossover and carry over to the Energy Code. And I think that that's always going to be important as we continue to move forward.
No, I absolutely agreed. Yeah, it's unfortunate because it's an occurrence every time this happens. And I know recently for me, where the example that comes is with Texas when when they were having the cold weather, and their grid failed on them, and they had blackout for weeks. And unfortunately, again, you had fires from candle burning, carbon monoxide poisoning from generators, et cetera, et cetera. Things that may seem like common sense to you and I, Tim, you know, I'll use it in quotations, even though we're on radio right now. You know, because we deal with it on a daily basis, isn't common knowledge or as common as we'd like it to be.
Well, yeah, and I think it's all about perspective, right? As code professionals, we all have a different perspective than maybe other people. And like I know that when I've done inspections, I've gone with people and I'll point something out and, you know, talk about the hazard associated with it. And they'll say, you know, we've walked past that 1,000 times. We never considered that to be a hazard. And so it's all about perspective and how can we share that perspective with others and educate them on those items. And we go back, like, you know, kind of go back to the, you know, the main topic we had earlier, talking about education. Those are, you know, some of the big things that we do. So, now we talked earlier about education and the code hotline or the energy hotline. But what other things does the outreach and education unit do to help support code officials in their work? And what resources do you offer for code officials through the Energy Commission?
Yeah. So I stated earlier, we develop fact sheets and guides and presentations, videos, and blueprint that not only help to educate what the code requirements are, but then also resources like plans examiners and field inspectors and even permit techs. You know, how does the energy code relate to what you're doing specifically as, you know, a building code official in that capacity as a plans examiner, field inspector, or the permit tech? And so all of our resources are posted on our central hub, what we call the Online Resource Center, or the ORC. That's at www.energy.ca.gov. And if you go to the Online Resource Center, you can access all of these resources. We're actually dating back a couple of code cycles. You can look at what we developed for 2016, 2019. We have some 2022 resources available. We are still in the process of updating and creating some of those. So what I highly recommend is signing up for our list server, because if you want to receive announcements for when new materials are available, that's our main conduit for educating stakeholders or informing them that, hey, we have these new resources available. On the Online Resource Center, we also link to publications and trainings developed and provided by the utilities, Energy Code ACE, BayREN, 3C-REN, etc. So, all of these resources, which are it's really meant to educate stakeholders overall. Anyone who looks at them, you know, should be able to look at them and identify what the code requirements are. But definitely, we have code enforcement in mind when developing these, and then there's resources that are specific to code officials, permit techs, plans examiners, and inspectors to assist them in their capacities and what they're doing, what they should be looking for as it relates to the energy code requirements and as it relates to the compliance forms, right? Certificates of compliance for plan review and certificates of inspection, verification, and also the HERS testing and acceptance testing as well.
Now, you hit on maybe, and I kind of maybe we'll back up a little bit, partner agencies and maybe some of these utility organizations that you work with to be able to share some additional information. And you mentioned that they may provide some type of training. Is that training, it's also housed on that website? Is it like YouTube training? Is it something that maybe code officials can, you know, do they have to log in? Do they have to pay a fee for it, or is it all free?
Yeah, so great question, Tim. So we have some of the videos on our website, but for what the utilities are providing, usually it's a link from our website and they'll host it. And so that's Energy Code ACE, BayREN, 3C-REN. This is all supported and funded through utility funding. And so you've already paid for this, quote unquote, which including the work that I do as well. So this is all free of charge, whether it's on our website, whether it's through Energy Code ACE, another utility, 3C-REN, BayREN. It is all available for free, the fact sheets, the guides, the trainings. Some of them are on demand, so you can watch them on demand. Some of them do it through YouTube. Sometimes it might be through some other platform. But yeah, code officials can, if you go to our website, you can link directly there. And yeah, you can watch some of these on demand, which I know can be helpful for code officials because it's always about time, right? Time.
Yeah. Yep.
It's difficult for code officials to sometimes do these during certain time periods. I do know many code officials that I dare say they're old school, which I am as well. They prefer the in-person, and I think COVID has taught us, regardless of what age you are, whether you're in elementary school, college, or even an adult, the best way to learn is in person. So I know many of them still want to do this in person. And so, many of the utilities are still providing trainings in person. They'll list their upcoming events and trainings. You could also do them virtually, or you could do them on demand. All of those are options, and they're all always free of charge to anyone, and including code officials.
Okay. All right. So that's good. And, because obviously, we all have very finite resources, right? We all have limited training dollars. And so anything that we can find to be able to share. And I know in talking with Mia with the Building Standards Commission, they also have a lot of different trainings that they offer, through the Building Standards Commission, which is good, or resources, I should say, that they offer, especially with, we talked about the triannual code update. There's Stuart Tom and Mia put together a video that was very helpful, especially for me when I did my first code adoption. So those are always good to have. And so being able to have those resources are definitely going to be good for many of us. And so being able to share that with everybody. And I'll make sure to share all of those links in the show notes. So if anybody has any, wants to go and research it, and we'll make sure to link it to this episode. So that way everybody has it and can gain access to it as well. So mentioned, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say real quick, so one thing I would add is that many of those entities are also preferred providers to the ICC. So again, I know for code officials and ICC certifications, I think for the ICC, 50% of the CEUs need to come from preferred providers. So Energy Code ACE, and 3C, it's my understanding that they are all preferred providers to the ICC. So again, they provide all of these trainings free of charge. They count towards CEUs, and they're also preferred provider CEUs through the ICC as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, that's fantastic, and I'm glad that you did, because being a preferred provider status, especially for those that are seeking, continuing education units for their, for their certifications, that's good. Now, ICC Region 1, we cover not only California, but also Nevada and Hawaii. Are those resources, I would imagine there's a lot of California-specific resources, right? But, some of these other resources that we just talked about linking to other providers, would maybe our listeners throughout the country, be able to benefit from some of these resources?
Absolutely. I think so. Whenever we're at an event, and in particular those that are, national or international, late last year, I think we were at NASIO, or not NASIO. Yeah, I think it was NASIO, where you have, national, and you have individuals and other code enforcement from other states, even from other countries, Canada, et cetera. They do look to California as a leader as in regards to the energy efficiency for buildings. And so, absolutely, if they're interested in what we're doing, they want to know what the code is. We've had delegates from other countries reach out to us and speak to us. And so, these resources, they are, like you said, Tim, they're going to be code specific to Title 24, Part 6, the California Energy Code. But it will educate them on what those code requirements are. And again, it's free to them as well if they want to access it. It's all online. So absolutely, if they're interested in what we're doing, or just conceptually, the requirements, I think they will benefit from it. And if anything, it'll teach them probably a little bit more on going above and beyond what's maybe required in their state potentially, or even in their region. I know Hawaii, I would argue, is kind of on par, in regards to energy efficiency. For obvious reasons, they're an island. I think they're seen as with PV currently right now. I think we're catching up. So for this region, even up north as well, I would say that their climates, maybe analogous. We'll probably have more, but I think they'll probably get more rain, things of that nature. But definitely see them benefiting. And worst case, quote unquote, scenario is that they learn going above and beyond what may be required for their region or their state. Yeah.
Well, and I talked to Chief Daniel Berlant with the State Fire Marshal's office, one of our last episodes, and he mentioned how California a lot of times is, people, we definitely are an example, and a lot of times, the codes and standards that we develop here definitely get shared across the country, because sometimes we are the testing ground, or not the testing ground, but the development of some of these codes and standards to be able to help with people, or help with some of the different needs, like mobile fueling, especially as a California issue, but definitely something that we have shared with others across the country. And so that's one of the things, I think, like you just mentioned, being able to go above and beyond is a good thing, but it might be something that we see in the base code or the model code in the future. And so that way people can start to look at it, and what may work in California may not work elsewhere across the country. We recognize that. No different than what works in the Central Valley where I'm at may not work on the coast or in the mountains. That's why we have code adoptions, and we take a look at the model code or the California edition of the codes, and then we can obviously amend it to geographical, topographical, and climatic issues that we have locally. So we talk a bit about code updates, it's part 6, right? So that way I don't get it confused. But part 6 is part of that, Title 24. But can you talk a bit about, maybe some of the changes that we saw come in this last code cycle, and maybe not necessarily the specific code examples, but maybe some of the maybe some of the higher level things that we've seen as we continue to move forward. I think solar or photovoltaic systems are always one of those things that we see in the code. But what are some of those highlights as we went into the 2022 edition of the codes?
Yeah, so I just you still hear me, Tim, right? I kind of lost you there for a second. Okay. This is one of the cons to remote working, right?
Yes.
When the internet goes out, you're down. Okay. Definitely. We had some big significant changes for 2022. I would say that years back with the CPUC we had a strategic plan for Z&E buildings, zero energy, and there was some lessons learned, grid harmonization, et cetera. And so now we transition and focus on decarbonizing buildings. So 2022 Energy Code takes one of those steps to achieving those goals, and moving forward, that'll be the focus for now. We added PV and battery storage requirements for certain non-residential building spaces and high-rise multifamily buildings that are more than 3 habitable stories. So again, I'll repeat, that was PV and battery storage requirements. There are several exceptions. These are prescriptive requirements. They're not mandatory. With that said, though, the baseline for the generation and the storage amounts to about 60-70% of the building annual electrical usage. So if an architect or builder wanted to go the performance approach and try to trade this off, they're probably still going to need some PV and or battery storage, because to completely trade off 60-70% of your generation and storage is going to probably be a little difficult. So the impact this has on design is that they're going to have to design and size PV and battery storage system meeting the requirements, consider the spacing, the locations, where it is going to be installed, in particular for battery storage systems. And then I think this is going to result in an increase in battery storage installations as well. We also have some new requirements for electric ready for single family buildings and multifamily dwellings, where the infrastructure, wiring, panel, etc. will need to meet certain requirements when a gas stovetop and or the furnace and or a clothes dryer, gas for any of those will be installed. And this is a mandatory requirement. So unless they meet an exception, or if they install electric or heat pump, they need to meet these requirements.
Okay.
The impact this has for builders is that, they need to provide the electrical infrastructure if they want to stick with these gas appliances moving forward, so that the transition to an electric or heat pump will be more feasible and cost effective at a later date.
Okay.
Also, another significant change are the heat pump baselines for HVAC and water heating, which vary by building type. For single-family buildings, the heat pump water heater is going to be the prescriptive baseline for all climate zones. A heat pump HVAC will be the baseline in a few climate zones. For non-residential buildings, heat pump water heaters will be the baseline for some schools. Heat pump HVAC will be a prescriptive baseline for certain capacities and types for specific building types. And then for multifamily dwellings, the heat pump HVAC is going to be the baseline for most climate zones. So to be clear, this is not a mandatory requirement. The Energy Commission is not banning gas. These are prescriptive requirements that are helping to support the decarbonization or electrification of buildings. And these also only apply to newly constructed buildings. So,
okay.
Yeah, where this has an impact on the builders is that they're going to need to start transitioning to heat pump water heaters and our HVAC systems when applicable to meet the baselines, or they have the option of sticking with gas under the performance approach, but they are going to take a penalty. We do have a new EDR score, energy design rating number 1, which is source energy, which is going to take into account greenhouse gases. So when you have a heat pump baseline, but you want to install gas, that's going to have a negative impact on this metric. And so what that means is that if they want to stick with gas and they have heat pump baselines, they're going to have to increase their overall building energy efficiency and for other components to make up that difference. And then we also have energy storage ready requirements for single family buildings. We're not requiring battery storage, we're requiring that they're energy storage ready for the single family in addition to the PV requirements. So this is obviously not all of the changes, but these are some of the significant changes, and those in particular that are conducive or supporting the decarbonization goals that we have for buildings.
Okay. Well, and it sounds like you just mentioned, you are providing the connection for that transition, but not necessarily a mandate. And there is trade-offs that builders and the building contractors, developers can use to be able to still move forward with some of these other, gas-fired appliances and those types of things. And I'll tell you, heat pumps, I grew up in the Midwest, and heat pumps were definitely something that we used quite a bit. I know my parents' house has a heat pump, and it's one of those things that we've definitely used. They've had it for decades now. And so it definitely is maybe something that we got maybe elsewhere in the country and now has moved to California, right? So, we talk about stuff happening in California transitioning out, and then we get stuff that happens elsewhere in the country and comes in. So now you use the term climate zones, and I'm not familiar with it. And I kind of, I can kind of deduct from our conversation what climate zones are. But can you kind of share when you talk about climate zones, are we talking about like different zones throughout the state? Like we got the Sierra Nevada, that's maybe a climate zone. We've got the Central Valley, that might be a climate zone, and maybe along the coast. Is that kind of how it's broken up? Maybe like seismic zones that we typically see in the CBC or the building code?
Yeah, so the climate zones for the energy code are unique to Part 6. It's reliant on ASHRAE data. And so, we break the state of California down into 16 climate zones. And you have some that run along the coast, some that are more central, and then as you go up north, and then also in the desert areas. So essentially, we've broken the state of California up into 16 climate zones that are, similar in climatic conditions, and we group them that way. And there's definitely physical lines and how they're defined. Those are all in our climate zone descriptions. And so the reason why they're important is because for some of these requirements, per the Warren-Alquist Act, the legislation that created the Energy Commission back in the 70s, the energy code requirements that we propose and adopt need to be cost effective. And so what may be cost effective for a more mild, cooler climate zone may not be cost effective for a warmer climate zone. And so that's where these climate zones, they're going to play an importance, is that what may be energy efficient for one building may not be so for the other, depending upon its climatic conditions. And like you stated earlier, topographical, climatic conditions, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to find that many of the requirements that we have specific to HVAC, where we're refrigerant cooling, duct leakage testing, airflow and fan watt draw, may be more stringent or applicable to a cooler climate zone. And then you're going to find also too, for the fenestration requirements and windows and more stricter U factor requirements, et cetera, or I should say more stringent SHGC, solar heat gain coefficient, are going to be more stringent for your hotter central climate than you would for the coast, because actually on the coast, if you were to model a building that has a too low of a SHGC, that's going to increase your heating demand, and actually that's going to penalize you. So I don't know if you say there's such thing as being too energy efficient, but in regards to where you're located, what is energy efficient for one building or one climate zone may not be so for the other. So you're going to find requirements that will apply across the board and are cost effective and will save energy, and then you're going to find some that are going to vary. And PV is another prime example. The PV requirements and the sizing are going to vary per your climate zone, again based on electrical annual usage, cooling, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, the climate zones play a very important part for many of the code requirements. They may vary based on climate zone.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. No different than, seismic zones and those types of things. I could definitely see that being an impact. Now, I don't think that, I probably should add this as we move on. We've talked a lot about new construction and, and those types of things, because really that's a lot of what we do. Codes a lot of times impact new construction, but I also think we should, maybe add a little bit of the discussion today on the built environment, things that are already built. Things that we, continue to have. And I know that, we talk about, anytime you do tenant improvements and those types of things, some of this stuff will be impacting, but let's maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about sustainability in the built environment and what type of programs and things does the Energy Commission work towards or strive to support energy savings and sustainability in the built environment?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So I'll first start off with the Energy Code. Part 6 has requirements for alterations and additions to existing buildings. So, if you're going to all your single-family home, commercial building, multifamily, et cetera, we have requirements that may be triggered depending upon what you're doing that would require you to meet certain energy efficiency requirements. So I want to start with that the Energy Code not only applies to majority of building types minus the L and C occupancies. But we also have requirements for newly constructed buildings, additions, and alterations to existing buildings. And so with that said, the Energy Commission is a very large agency, and we serve many roles and responsibilities. And so there are other programs as there's executive orders or assembly bills and Senate bills that are approved. The Energy Commission is being tasked to implement some of these. And so, we already currently have the benchmarking program, which I believe applies to larger commercial buildings and multifamily, where they have to report their energy usage so that, if there's a new occupant or owner, they could identify what is the energy usage of this building and how should you address that. And then also there's several funding programs that were available in the past and some that will come up in the future to help, with weatherization or, modifying, transitioning from, gas to electric, to help satisfy decarbonizing buildings. Many utilities already have those programs in place, so definitely, reach out to them. But there's funding coming down, from the state and also the federal government for the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'd say, definitely stay tuned. There might be more funding and programs that are going to assist with the transition, to heat pumps from gas to electric and switching for cooking, et cetera, et cetera. That's for, just for the existing alone. The agency overall has, I should say that they are definitely focusing and I would argue moving forward as we continue tightening the screw for newly constructed buildings. Where do you go from there, right? You get to a point of no return, right? We've done all we can, so where do we go from there? I would say definitely the Energy Code and also the agency, they're going to be more hyper-focused on, the existing buildings and how do you address those. And because as the newer buildings become more energy efficient, what about your demand is going to be on that side for the existing buildings? So, we're going to already focused on that and have several programs focusing on existing buildings and increasing their energy efficiency through assembly bills and Senate bills. And so, yes, we will definitely be more hyper-focused on them. And then also funding and incentives to bring those up to code, or just not even just up to code, to make them more energy efficient. Might be available as well. So absolutely, existing buildings are an important part, if not one of the major parts of the portfolio, and focusing on increasing their energy efficiency and reducing their electrical usage. Absolutely.
And so there are programs, like you just mentioned, there are programs available. And so I would imagine that a lot of that is also going to be on that, on your website for, homeowners or even, people within the state of California to be able to take advantage of, be able to, find that information and hopefully be able to maybe change or transition to maybe some more energy, efficient appliances. I know, like for myself, we added solar onto our house, to be able to help with our electrical usage. Our electrical bill was quite high during the summer months one year, and we said enough's enough, and so we went with solar, and that definitely seemed to help us move forward a little bit and be a little bit more energy conscious as well. Now we talked about sustainability, but resilience, I think, is another big thing that we need to talk about too. And maybe this actually is my last question for you: is the resiliency that we face. California is a diverse climate, but we also are impacted by climate change. We talked about the hotter summers, the colder winters, and right now we're impacted by a lot of wet weather. And so there's a growing need for buildings not only to sustain the next 10 years, but the 50 to 100 years. And so I think we're working through that and trying to help, identify, like you mentioned, some of the changes being, electrical ready for some of these larger appliances. But can you talk a little bit about how the Energy Code helps address the impacts of this resiliency and being able to make sure that buildings are going to withstand the effects of climate change as we move into the future?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I stated earlier that, we transitioned to the goals of decarbonizing buildings or electrifying, as many in the industry refer to it as. And so with these 2022 Energy Code requirements and as we move forward with the PV, the battery storage, the electric rated, the heat pump water heating, and HVAC baselines like you were just referring to, Tim, the result is hopefully, you have a reduction in our carbon footprint and reducing the production of greenhouse gases from gas burn appliances. And the hope there is that you help mitigate some of the effects of climate change by reducing those greenhouse gases. Also by increasing building efficiency, reducing energy usage, it reduces the demand on the grid to ensure that, electricity is supplied consistently and securely. And then also with both the PV and battery storage installations, specifically for non-residential and multifamily buildings, the result is, an increase in site production and storage and use, which hopefully results in reducing the reliance on the grid, in particular during peak demand time periods. And so I would argue what the long-term goal is to maximize building energy efficiency, decarbonize buildings, optimize the on-site PV production, storage, and usage, and reduce the demand on the grid. And hopefully all of those are going to make the buildings more resilient, and in essence, more self-sufficient as it relates to building energy efficiency and on-site production, storage, and usage, and reducing that demand on the grid.
Yeah, and like you just hit, it's a multifaceted approach. Those are all things that I think that more and more of us are looking at. I mean, I even know that I have some energy storage with my solar now. It's a battery that if my power would happen to go out for whatever reason, let's say we have a blackout for whatever reason, wildfire, whatever, or we lost power during a storm. At least I have some energy storage, so that way it'll continue to support the essential functions that I need to live, and be able to continue to maybe address some of those things that we talked about earlier. Some of those extra, the climactic things within our own homes, and kind of the creature comfort kind of things, right? And so I think that over time we're just going to continue to get better, and hopefully the homes become more efficient and more resilient and more self-sustaining. I think that that's a lot of what I think you just were mentioning is how do we become more self-sustained as we move forward? So, but yeah, I think that those are all great things, and I hope that over time we'll definitely start to see that. So,
absolutely, and like you said, with the point, during natural disasters or blackouts, assuming your home is still intact, but the grid's down, and there's no supply. That if you have your on-site production and storage, Like you said, instead of, you may still have to use a generator here and there, but at least with production and storage, that can now provide some of the necessities. And then you can rotate your usage either to, go along with that or, reduce your generation and greenhouse gas burning generator, in essence.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, Chris, I really appreciate your time. But before we end, is there anything else that you would like to add to be able to share with the listeners of our podcast?
Yeah, man, so I would just like to say, especially for code enforcement, we're always, seeking your input and through the development phase and also for updates and improvements and modernization. So the one thing I just want to share is that we have several workshops going on. 2025 is already under development. The utilities are conducting their stakeholder workshops. So if you go to, I believe phase 2 is coming up. So if you go to www.title24stakeholders.com, you can, all of these are held remotely, they're virtual. So if you want to listen in or watch them afterwards, they're seeking input now. The utilities are seeking the input now for what's being proposed or what improvements to make for 2025. So I highly recommend if you have not gone there, especially code enforcement, please check out the Title24stakeholders.com, see what it's about, see how you can get involved, because when we hear from the building departments, understandably with limited resources and staffing and time, we usually hear from them after the fact, right? The code's already in effect, they're implementing it, and it's too late, quote unquote, at that point, right? You got to wait for next code cycle. Definitely please check that out. Also, we are in the process of considering updates to the HERS requirements, even considering moving the Title 20 requirements for HERS to Title 24. Seeking input on those and how to improve or update the HERS program, and also modernizing the energy code in the documents. So we're considering maybe consolidating some of the energy code documents. Considering, how those are available digitally, including the forms and how to complete those. And so, if you go to our website, theenergy.ca.gov, and you go to events, you can see when we are conducting these staff workshops as it relates to updates and improvements to the HERS program and also modernization of the energy code in our documents. So again, if you haven't been to our website, I highly recommend check it out. Check out what events are coming up. Check out the ORC, and then also, if you go to our subscriptions, I highly recommend you sign up for our building energy efficiency standards list server and our blueprint. If you sign up for those, you will automatically receive updates when these workshops are happening, when the pre-rulemaking will start for 2025, when we have a new blueprint, when we have a new fact sheet, or even when we have a new HERS provider, our new software has been approved. Anything energy code related for Part 6 will be communicated on these listservs. And so that's what I would highly recommend is if you go to the website as well, if you sign up for those listservs, you will automatically receive those updates, and that will help tie you into everything else that we just discussed earlier.
Yeah, so the probably the takeaway, if I'm hearing it correctly, is get involved and stay up to date. And the more you get involved, the more you can influence change, locally, and then also within the state as well. But then also, stay up to date, subscribe. Get a hold of this information. These resources are available to everyone. And so we'll make sure to include all the links in like I said earlier, in the show notes. So that way everybody's got them. They can take a look at them, and hopefully, this will maybe motivate some that have, maybe some ideas to help kind of continue to move us forward, and continue to go, advance the mission of what we're trying to do here with the sustainability. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the end goal is to increase compliance and enforcement of the energy code. So like you said, Tim, make sure that their voice is heard and potentially be able to influence meaningful change into the code so that we can increase compliance and enforcement. That's the end goal definitely for us, but I would argue for the building departments and code officials as well, for all parts of Title 24.
All right. Well, Chris, I thank you for your time. This has been definitely informational for me. Being a fire code official, this is definitely one of the things that energy code we don't really talk about a lot. We do, but we don't, right? But there is a lot of crossover that I think that, fire code officials, especially myself, people can definitely take advantage of it and learn a little bit. And that's why I'm glad that we had this conversation. So thank you. I want to thank you again for this. And then, if anybody has any questions or concerns, make sure to leave us a comment. We'll make sure to share those and pass those along. But Chris, again, I want to thank you for being on ICC Region One Radio.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Tim, and I hope to see everyone out there soon in the field.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.